Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Several months before his tragic death nearly 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy said, quote, "The wave of the future is not the conquest of a single dogmatic creed, but the liberation of the diverse energies of free nations and free people." I want to thank the Iranian-American community of Northern California for inviting me to be part of your critically important summit here in Washington, D.C., joined by the people from Ashraf 3, all here for a democratic and free Iran. And I'm truly humbled to be here to speak to you today and to express my support as you continue your unrelenting fight for a free and democratic Iran. And it's a special honor to follow Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which has put forth a 10-point plan for a democratic Iran, which includes being governed by a rule of law, so fundamental to a free and just society. And this plan has been endorsed by 224 members of both political parties in the new 118th Congress. This new Congress convened just a little over 2 months ago, and to have such a majority, such a strong number of members of Congress from both parties signing on to this resolution is a testament to the power and righteousness of your cause. And thank you, Mrs. Rajavi, for your steadfast leadership and dedication to a democratic and free Iran. And I have to say it's been indeed an honor to follow Vice President Pence and to share the stage and the podium with Governor Brownback, Senator Torricelli, and General Wesley Clark. I know that sometimes people refer to him as governor or senator, but in my profession, I've been told that governor is actually the higher title for Mr. Brownback. The people in the government of the United States of America stand in full solidarity with the people of Iran and fully support their desire to be a free people. And you are waging an heroic uprising against a corrupt and brutal terrorist regime. High unemployment, runaway inflation, widespread poverty, stagnant production, growing bankruptcies, water and electricity shortages, and growing starvation. The people of Iran are suffering under this brutal current regime. With the protests, social and political unrest, and major national uprisings of the recent years, and now the nationwide protests of the last several months, it's clear that the Iranian people want fundamental political change that will transform the current system of despotic religious fascism to secular democratic rule and a fair and just independent judiciary. The Iranian people deserve a government that respects democratic norms, the rule of law, and places the needs, dreams, and aspirations of the Iranian people above repression at home and terrorism abroad. It's therefore critical for the United States and other democracies around the world to stand with the Iranian people. Democracies must support the resistance and opposition groups that have played a crucial role in countering the regime's repressive actions and giving hope to millions of Iranians who yearn for freedom. Summits and gatherings like this remind the world that the evil regime does not speak for the people, that Iranians are committed to the ideals of democracy like free speech, public assembly, and fair elections, that human rights are universal rights desired by every people and every nation on earth. Since the tyrants governing Iran came to power in 1979, hundreds of thousands of Iranians have suffered arrest and death for standing up to these cruel rulers. In addition to being a state sponsor of terrorism, the regime in Tehran continues to suppress the most fundamental human rights of its own people. Women in Iran suffer under a system of discrimination and inequality. And according to the laws of the Islamic Republic, the life of a woman, literally, is regarded as half as valuable as that of a man. The combined effect is that women and girls in Iran, half the Iranian population, are vulnerable to violence and harassment permeating every aspect of their lives. On September 13, 2022, Mahsa Amini, an aspiring 22-year-old lawyer, was arrested by the morality police for supposedly wearing her hijab in a way that exposed some of her hair. 3 days later, she was dead after being beaten by police, according to eyewitnesses. After decades of a regime that relentlessly harassed, demeaned, and subjugated women, along with squashing all notions of human rights, Amini's death was the final straw in exposing the cruelty and disregard of the regime. In the protests that have spread to all 31 provinces, 280 cities, and over 100 large universities, many women have removed their hijabs and cut their hair. And doctors and nurses have reported that security forces were purposely shooting at and targeting women during the protests. The UN and other human rights groups say that 14,000 to 18,000 people have been arrested, 300 to 400 people killed, including more than 600 children. And the opposition group, the MEK, has released the names of 664 protesters killed. 4 individuals have already been executed for acts in connection with the protests after trials held just within days of the arrest, and many more have been identified for execution. The protests that started after Amini's death have unleashed a broad-based movement across class and ethnic lines, all united in opposition to cleric rule. Merchants shut their businesses, and workers joined in the strikes and the protests. Different from past uprisings, the current protests, spearheaded by women and young people and joined by men, have transformed into a universal call for regime change and democracy. From the Kurds to the Arabs, from the Baluchis to the various nationalities and ethnicities, and among the followers of many religions, all want a free republic based on separation of religion and state. And with every protester killed, especially innocent children, the regime has only fueled more protest. And it cannot be a coincidence that over 5,000 young students, mostly girls in girls' schools, have been sickened by some form of poisonous gas since November in the aftermath of the recent nationwide protest. Outrage over the poisonings and the virtual silence and inaction by the government have prompted fresh protests. As this summit demonstrates, Iranian Americans stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. And all across our nation, Americans have been protesting Amini's death and the repression of the Iranian people by the ruling clerics. Even in my own state of Washington, protest rallies have occurred regularly on weekends in cities all across our state for the past 6 months, with one event drawing thousands of people repeating the chants from the streets of Tehran: women, life, and freedom, and death to the dictator, death to Khamenei, all heard in Iran. And it's not just women who have suffered under the regime. Ethnic minorities in Iran are among the most subjugated, dehumanized, and repressed groups in Iran, including under the time of the dictatorship of the Shah. While the current socio-political and socio-economic situations are difficult for the wider Iranian population, the nation's ethnic minorities are suffering the worst social, economic, political deprivation, including the deprivation of education and health care. Tehran must be treated like the pariah state that it is. The international community must side with the Iranian people in their historic and heroic struggle for freedom and democracy. International bodies from the UN to the World Court must hold the regime leaders accountable for the decades of crimes against humanity. The 1988 massacre of roughly 30,000 political prisoners, the vast majority of whom were members of the opposition movement, the MEK. And those killed in the brutal crackdown of protests following the 2019 sham election of Ebrahim Raisi, and the killings during the current protest, and of course the suppression of minority groups. It's notable and laudable that the UN Human Rights Council recently voted to appoint an independent investigator to document the brutal crackdown on the nationwide protests that have swept Iran these last several months. But the protests that started in September 2022 are not a sudden, overnight phenomenon, but yet another visible manifestation and result of 40-plus years of organized resistance to the regime. And during this time, the MEK and its leadership have paid a huge price in blood. The role of women in the leadership ranks of the resistance and in fighting back against the clerics is clearly evident in the streets of Iran. The revolution you are supporting is about bringing democracy and freedom to Iran. It is not about returning to the dark and brutal days of a dictatorial monarchy of the Shah. The people of Iran have paid a heavy price in their resistance against two dictatorships, the current regime and the Shah. I have had occasion in the past to speak to many of you in the audience, and many of you in that audience have suffered as political prisoners or lost family members at the hand of the current regime, including during the 1988 massacre, and many relatives of those murdered by the regime are now part of the brave MEK resistance units within Iran. And some of you in the audience or your relatives, including, as we heard from our MC, Anahita Sami, have been tortured or been victims of the Shah's secret police, the Savak. Iran will never return to its pre-September 2022 days, and it will not return to the single-party dictatorial rule of the Shah's monarchy. Because the chants by the protesters in Iran include death to the oppressor, be it the Shah or the leader. America has a proud tradition of supporting the rights of aggrieved people all around the world, as Vice President Pence said. The people of Iran can be confident that President Biden understands their persecution and will always support their efforts for a democratic nation. Just months ago, President Biden said, quote, "For decades, Iran's regime has denied fundamental freedoms to its people and suppressed the aspirations of successive generations through intimidation, coercion, and violence. The United States stands with Iranian women and all citizens of Iran who are inspiring the world with their bravery." As you work to create a vibrant, new, democratic Iran, let me share the words of President Barack Obama about the beginnings of American democracy and its Constitution. It wasn't perfect, but embedded in this document was a North Star that would guide future generations, a system of representative government, a democracy through which we could better realize our highest ideals. And as General Wesley Clark said, we call this a continuing experiment. But let me just conclude by saying it's been an honor to join you today. Your cause is just and noble. And may the flame from the lamp of liberty that you hold with such courage and conviction keep you warm, give you strength and guidance. May there soon be a free and democratic Iran. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.